I pulled off the highway late at night, exhausted from driving too many hours in a row. The glowing sign of the small roadside motel caught my eye, its flickering letters promising. I didn't think twice. I just needed a bed and a few hours of quiet sleep. The lobby was nearly empty. A tired-looking clerk handed me the key to room 6 without much conversation. I carried my bag down the narrow hall, the carpet worn and stained, the air heavy with dust and old cigarette smoke. Inside, the room was what you would expect from a cheap motel. A sagging bed, yellowed wallpaper, and a buzzing lamp on the nightstand. The bathroom smelled faintly of bleach, but at least it looked clean. I told myself I didn't care about the condition. I only wanted rest. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and dropped onto the mattress. For a while I stared at the ceiling, letting the hum of traffic outside lull me. Finally, sleep began to take me. That was when I heard it. A knock. 3 short raps against the door. I opened my eyes, groggy and annoyed. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was just after 1 a.m. Nobody should be visiting me at that hour. I waited, listening. No more knocks. I convinced myself it was probably some drunk guest who had the wrong room. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that crept over me. I got up, checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I locked the door again and returned to bed. My body ached for sleep, but my mind wouldn't calm down. Minutes passed. My eyelids grew heavy. Then I heard it again. This time it wasn't just knocking. Alongside the dull thuds came a whisper, high-pitched, fragile, like a child's voice. "Let me in." The words made my skin crawl. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I told myself it had to be my imagination, some half-dream caused by exhaustion. But when I held my breath, I could hear it more clearly. "Let me in." I got up, checked the door again. Nothing. The hallway was silent and still. I didn't open it. Instead, I turned on the TV for background noise, hoping it would drown out the sound. The static chatter of some late-night show filled the room. Eventually, I lay back down and tried to convince myself I was safe. At some point, I must have drifted off. The next thing I knew, sunlight was bleeding through the curtains. The clock read 7:43 a.m. I felt groggy but relieved to have made it through the night. For a few moments, I wondered if I had imagined everything. Maybe it was only the product of my tired mind. I went into the bathroom to wash up. That was when I froze. On the tile floor, just inside the doorway, were faint footprints. Small, wet, they led from the entrance toward the sink. My stomach tightened. The footprints were far too small to belong to any adult. They looked like the prints of a child. I backed up, staring in disbelief. I had locked the door. Nobody should have been able to get in. My eyes followed the trail. The tiny prints stopped in front of the mirror above the sink. That was when I noticed something else. Ladders. Scrawled across the glass, in a dark, dried red streak, was my name. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The letters looked smeared, as if written hastily by a small hand. The streaks had dried to a dark, rusty brown. I stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. My pulse hammered in my ears. Someone or something had been in my room while I slept. I stood there staring at the mirror, my name smeared across the glass. Every instinct told me to leave immediately, but my body refused to move. My thoughts were scattered, tripping over each other. How had anyone gotten inside? Why write my name? Finally, I grabbed my bag and rushed out of the bathroom. My hand shook as I threw my clothes into it. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to start rattling under a knock. I didn't care about checking out. I just wanted out. But before I reached the door, something made me stop. The footprints. They were gone. I turned back to the bathroom. The floor was spotless now, the tiles dry as if nothing had ever been there. The mirror, too. My name had vanished. The glass reflected only my pale face, wide eyes, and trembling lips. I gripped the door handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. The lock turned, but the door stayed shut, as if someone was holding it from the other side. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the wood, the same rhythm as before. I stumbled back, heart thundering. The whisper followed, high, thin, right against the door. "Let me in," I shouted, voice breaking, telling whoever it was to go away. Silence followed. I waited, clutching the bag to my chest. Then, slowly, I walked to the peephole. No one. The hallway stretched out empty, bathed in pale morning light. But when I backed away, another sound crept through the room. The bathroom faucet turned on by itself. I bolted forward, flicked the light on. The sink gurgled, water running full blast, and in the mirror, for just a second, I saw movement. A figure. Small, pale, standing behind me. I spun around, nothing. The water shut off. My breathing grew ragged. My vision blurred with panic. Desperate, I yanked at the door again, this time with everything I had. Suddenly, it gave way, slamming open. The hallway looked ordinary, lifeless. I didn't wait. I sprinted down the corridor, past the office, out into the parking lot. The morning air felt like freedom. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and drove without looking back. But even as the motel shrank in my rearview mirror, I couldn't escape the feeling that I wasn't alone. Hours later, I stopped at a gas station to wash my face in the restroom. When I looked up into the mirror, my stomach dropped. In the corner of the glass, faint but visible, was a smeared handprint. Small, childlike, and just beneath it, written in streaks of red, was my name again. I remember the first night in that motel as if it never really ended. The place was called Riverside Inn. It was one of those roadside motels you see off the highway, the kind that looks clean enough from the outside but carries a strange heaviness once you step in. My girlfriend Emily and I checked in late after a long drive. The manager at the front desk looked tired, barely glancing at us when he slid the room key across the counter. We were given room 6. The air smelled faintly of old smoke, though the sign on the wall insisted it was non-smoking. Emily laughed it off, tossed her bag on the bed, and said, "It's just one night." I agreed. It wasn't worth overthinking. But when night came, I realized something was off. Around midnight, I was half asleep when I heard it, a muffled voice through the wall to our left. At first, it sounded like arguing. A man's voice raised, then a woman's scream. Emily sat up, wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" We pressed our ears against the wall. The sound was clearer now. It wasn't just noise. Someone was screaming words, desperate, like they were begging. Then a loud thud, like furniture being thrown. Emily whispered, "We should call the desk." I hesitated. The voices stopped so suddenly that the silence felt heavier than the screaming had. I told her maybe it was a TV in the next room. But deep down I knew it wasn't. There had been panic in that woman's voice, raw and real. Sleep didn't come easy after that. Every few minutes I thought I heard faint scratching against the wall, like nails dragging across plaster. Emily eventually drifted off, but I stayed awake, staring at the dark. In the morning we went down to the lobby. I decided to ask casually, as if it were no big deal. "Hey, who's in the room next to us?" "Think they were having some kind of fight last night." The manager's face changed instantly. His tired eyes sharpened. "Which room?" "Room 5, I said. He just shook his head. "That room hasn't been used in years." I laughed nervously, waiting for him to explain, but he didn't. He only repeated himself, slower this time. "That room is empty." Emily frowned. "No, that's impossible. We heard people in there, yelling, screaming." The man's expression hardened. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "If you heard something, you should check out today. People who stay after hearing things from that room don't stay long." A cold wave went through me. "What do you mean, don't stay long?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a printed checkout receipt as if the decision had already been made for us. Emily grabbed my arm. "Let's just leave," she whispered. But curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to see room 5 for myself. When the manager turned his back, I slipped down the hallway. Emily hissed at me not to, but I ignored her. The door to room 5 was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The curtains were drawn, dust heavy on the furniture. No one had stayed here in a long time, that much was obvious. But the strangest part was the wall, the same one that connected to our room. Deep gouges scarred the plaster, long vertical scratches that looked like someone had clawed at it in desperation. And on the carpet, right against the wall, there was a dark stain, faded but unmistakable. Emily caught up to me and gasped, "We're leaving, now." I wanted to agree. But as I turned to leave, I heard it again, muffled, faint, but clear enough. A voice. It was coming from the wall. Not from our side this time, but from inside it. Emily ran. I stood frozen, staring at the cracked plaster, listening as the whisper grew louder, almost like it was calling my name. I should have run with Emily. I should have checked out, gotten in the car, and never looked back. But something about that whisper glued me to the spot. It was soft, almost pleading, like someone trapped behind the wall. The voice repeated a single word, my name. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening. Emily was already at the door, yelling at me to get out. I finally snapped free and followed her, slamming the door to room 5 shut. We didn't wait to talk to the manager again. We grabbed our things and headed for the car. But as soon as I turned the key in the ignition, the engine gave a hollow click and died. Tried again. Nothing. Emily's hands shook as she reached for her phone, but there was no signal. The manager stood outside the lobby window staring at us. He didn't wave, didn't move, just watched. Emily whispered, "We need to walk to town." It was still early, sun rising over the trees. We locked the car and started toward the main road. That's when I heard footsteps behind us, slow, heavy, perfectly in sync with ours. I turned. No one was there. We walked faster. The footsteps followed. By the time we reached the corner, Emily was crying, "I don't care. I'm calling for help." She tried again, still no signal. Her battery icon flashed red, then the phone shut off completely. I grabbed her hand and pulled her down a dirt path toward the woods. I thought we could cut through and reach the next highway exit. But the deeper we went, the more disoriented I became. The trees seemed to repeat themselves. Every turn looked like the last, and then we saw it, the motel. We had walked in a wide circle, somehow ending right back at the parking lot. Room 5's curtains were now wide open. Something moved inside. A pale figure stood at the window, face pressed against the glass, watching us. Emily screamed. We bolted back into our room, slammed the door, and pushed the dresser against it. I didn't know what else to do. My hands shook so badly I could barely lock the latch. For hours we sat in silence, listening. At first it was quiet. Then the scratching started again. Long, slow drags of nails on the wall. Sometimes it sounded close, like right against my ear. Other times it echoed deep inside, like the wall itself was hollow and filled with movement. Emily broke down. "We're going to die here." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that we'd get out when the sun rose higher, when people started moving around. But deep down I knew the manager had been serious. People who heard the voices didn't last. By afternoon, the whispers grew louder. They weren't muffled anymore. They came from all around the room, male, female, young, old, all speaking at once, overlapping, as if dozens of people were trapped inside the walls. Emily clutched my arm. "They're trying to get us in there." She was right. The voices began to shift, imitating. One sounded exactly like Emily, calling my name from the other side of the wall. Another mimicked me, begging her to open the door. We covered our ears, but it didn't matter. The voices slipped through, vibrating in our skulls. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point exhaustion won. When I woke, the room was silent. Emily was gone. The dresser was still in place, the door still locked. There was no way she could have left. Yet her side of the bed was empty, sheets crumpled as if she had been pulled into the wall itself. I searched every corner of the room, screaming her name, pounding on the plaster until my fists bled. That's when I noticed the new scratches, fresh grooves carved into the wall deeper than the old ones, and in between them faint letters spelled out, "Stay." I lost it. I shoved the dresser aside, tore open the door, and ran. Past the lobby, past the parking lot, straight to the road. I didn't stop running until a truck pulled over and the driver asked if I was all right. When I looked back, the motel was gone, nothing but trees and empty highway. The police never found Emily. They searched for days. They never found the Riverside Inn either. Sometimes, though, when the night is quiet, I hear her voice through the walls of my own apartment. Soft, pleading, just like that first night, calling my name. And every time I hear it, I remember the manager's warning. People who hear the voices never stay long. I checked into the motel late in the evening, road dust still clinging to my jacket. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up from his old radio when I asked for a room. He slid a brass key across the counter, the tag marked with the faded number 6. "There's plenty of empty rooms," I said, confused. He shook his head. "That one's yours." "Nobody takes it." His tone was flat, like a statement, not a choice. The hallway smelled of stale smoke and mildew. The door to room 6 stood at the end. The brass numbers were tarnished, but the lock clicked open smoothly like it had been oiled yesterday. Inside, the air felt heavy. Dust covered the chairs, the dresser, the mirror. My shoes left faint trails on the floorboards, but the bed was different. The quilt was tucked in perfectly, pillow puffed, sheets white and clean. It didn't fit the rest of the room at all. I set my bag down and checked the bathroom. Rust stains lined the sink, and the mirror was cloudy, but nothing unusual. No running toilet, no broken light, just old. Still, something about the room didn't let me relax. I tried to shrug it off. I'd been on the road for 9 hours. Fatigue always makes shadows feel longer. I sat on the bed. It didn't creak, even though the frame looked older than me. The mattress was firm, almost too perfect. I lay down, staring at the ceiling fan that hadn't spun in years. The room seemed to shift with the rhythm of my breathing. The smell of dust faded. A faint scent crept in iron and smoke. My head turned to the window. The grime was gone, replaced by glass so clean I could see the parking lot, but it wasn't empty anymore. Cars from another era sat outside, their chrome shining under neon lights that weren't there when I pulled in. I blinked hard. My pulse hammered. The wallpaper changed too. The peeling beige turned into deep red patterns, fresh and bright. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, quick, nervous. Voices rose and fell, muffled but close. The motel was alive. I sat up fast. The dresser was no longer dusty. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on top, next to a pack of matches. An ashtray with a lit cigarette burned on its edge, smoke curling into the air. Someone had been here. Someone was here. The doorknob rattled. A man's voice whispered from the hall. I couldn't catch the words. I froze, staring, my breath shallow. Then the door stayed shut, and silence returned. I grabbed my bag and stood. My phone buzzed, screen lighting up. But the display showed no bars, no time, nothing. Just a blank glow before it went dark. The sound of laughter drifted in, followed by a woman's scream that cut short, like a rope pulled tight around her throat. My stomach dropped. The air was hot now, the walls pressing closer. The mirror above the dresser no longer reflected me. Instead, it showed the bed covered in blood. A body sprawled across it, eyes wide open, mouth twisted mid-scream. But when I turned, the bed was still neat, sheets crisp, pillow untouched. I forced myself closer to the mirror. The body in the reflection twitched. Its hand reached toward me. My breath caught. The door slammed from the inside, though I hadn't touched it. The sound was sharp, final. I wasn't alone in that room anymore. I stumbled back from the mirror, my heel catching on the corner of the rug. The body in the reflection shifted again, its face slowly turning toward me, though my own figure should have been there. My chest tightened and a cold sweat broke down my spine. The lights flickered, buzzing, and the air filled with the low hum of voices. I spun around, expecting people to be inside the room, but no one stood there. The bed, though, was no longer untouched. The sheets were ripped open, stained with dark streaks. A woman lay on her side, blood soaking her dress, eyes glassy and fixed. Her lips moved slightly, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall. My mind screamed to run, but the doorknob rattled again, harder this time. Shouts echoed in the hallway, men yelling, boots pounding against the floor. The noise grew until it sounded like dozens of people rushing outside my door. Then the door burst open. Figures surged in. Men with wide eyes and clenched fists. Their faces were twisted with anger, their hands clutching knives, hammers, even a shotgun. They didn't look at me. They didn't see me. Their attention was on the people now appearing all over the room. 2 men at the table, playing cards. A couple by the dresser. A teenage boy sitting on the floor, clutching his knees. They hadn't been there seconds ago. They were dressed in clothes from decades earlier. Their laughter and chatter broke off as the attackers stormed in. The room exploded with violence. The woman by the bed screamed, cut short as the knife plunged into her chest. The couple at the dresser tried to run, but one of the men swung a hammer, cracking bone. Blood sprayed across the wallpaper that moments earlier had been clean. The boy on the floor cried out, but his voice was drowned in the chaos. I pressed myself tighter into the wall, but I couldn't look away. My brain told me none of this was real, yet I could smell the iron tang of blood, hear the tearing of flesh, the breaking of ribs. One of the men lifted the shotgun. The blast tore across the room, shredding bodies, leaving silence behind. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the scene froze. The attackers stood motionless, their eyes empty. The victims lay scattered, blood pooling. And then, piece by piece, they vanished. First the bodies, then the furniture, then the stains on the walls. The room sank back into dust and silence. Only the bed remained perfectly made again. I gasped for air, shaking. My legs barely held me up. I rushed to the door, yanked it open, and bolted into the hallway. But the corridor was no longer the one I'd walked earlier. The lights glowed bright. Music played faintly from somewhere, and guests walked by in old-fashioned clothes, chatting and laughing. None of them looked at me. None of them seemed to notice the blood dripping from the corner of my sleeve. I stumbled toward the lobby. The front desk was manned by a younger version of the same clerk who had given me the key. His face was smooth, his hair dark, his posture straight. He glanced up, his expression calm. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said. I slammed my hand on the counter. "What is that room? What did I just see?" He looked me dead in the eye. "That room remembers. It keeps the night locked inside, and it shows it to anyone foolish enough to lie in that bed." I shook my head, my voice cracking. It wasn't real. It couldn't have been. He leaned forward. "Tell me, did you smell the blood? Did you hear the screams? Then it was real enough." I turned and ran out the front door. The parking lot wasn't the same either. The cars outside were still from another era. The neon sign blazed vacancy in bright red letters, but the paint on the walls was new, not peeling. My car was gone. I spun around, panic rising. The air felt heavy, charged. I tried my phone again, but the screen stayed black, unresponsive. From behind me, the motel door creaked open. I heard footsteps, slow, steady, coming closer. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me to run, but where would I go? I was already trapped in a place that didn't belong to my time. The voice of the clerk echoed from the dark. "You can leave, but you'll take it with you." The sound of the scream from the room shot through my skull again, distant yet piercing. The image of the woman's glassy eyes burned into my vision, and I knew he was right. The room wasn't locked anymore. It had followed me,